Welcome back to So Mom Pod. I am Dr. Priscilla Sands.
I'm Adele Griffin, and each week on So Mom, we talk about what it means to be a storyteller or an educator. And this week, we have someone on the show who is a little bit of both, kind of a hybrid, Michelle Gagnon. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Michelle Gagnon, a best-selling author of thrillers, a YA storyteller, an advocate for LGBTQ plus transitional youth. Her work spans genres and generations, and we cannot wait to dig in.
But Michelle, before we start, I wanted to read your bio that I picked off the website, and I'm going to read it because as I read it, I couldn't stop laughing and imagining you in all these jobs. I thought I had multiple jobs at some time in my life, but you win. So here it is. Michelle Gagnon is a former modern dancer, bartender, dog walker, model, personal trainer, freelance journalist, and maybe my favorite, Russian supper club performer. Yay. Critics agree that her performance at most of these professions was middling at best. Her best-selling thrillers have been published in dozens of languages worldwide and were nominated for a Daphne du Maurier Award for Excellence in Mystery, Suspense, and a Thriller Award. While they failed to garner either of these prestigious prizes, the banquet dinners were lovely. It's all about the dinner. Michelle has served as a court-appointed special advocate in the foster care system, specializing in work with LGBTQ plus transitional age youth. A graduate of Wesleyan University, she is pursuing a master's degree in clinical psychology at Antioch University, Los Angeles. A native Rhode Islander, sort of. She is currently a reluctant Angelina, where she lives with her family and way too many pets.
It's all very accurate.
Sometime I want to hear about every single one of those jobs.
Right.
Welcome to the podcast. We are all sort of native Rhode Islanders. Sort of.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah.
And talk about clam cakes.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, and Matunek, the Matunek
And-
oyster bar.
And quahogs, because only a Rhode Islander will know what a quahog is.
Exactly.
Michelle, when I first met you, I remember that we had a little bit of a connection with you talking about all of these dogs.
Way too many dogs. Yes. No, and last night one of them threw its back out, so it's been a really fun 24 hours.
Oh,
Yeah.
Only you would have one of those dogs throw its back out.
I know.
Well, I didn't know the connection that you and Adele bonded over with your pets, but I have my own special connection because your fabulous stepdaughter was a student of mine. And I remember actually some lovely conversations in my office, and I just think the world of her.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, she's a special kid.
She really is.
and we're also Super Bowl party friends. I don't know how that didn't make it into your bio.
Next one. It's being updated.
Next. Update it.
We know about your patchwork of jobs, but you became a really successful writer. So what was the through line? How did it happen? Was there a book you loved, a special spark? What was it that had you pivot to this other career?
So it's funny, I've always written. I mean, I won my first, really, I think, ironically, I think the only writing award I've ever won was when I was like 6 years old. I was living in Cleveland, and a short story that I wrote for my first grade class called, so it was about a toothbrush named Timmy, and I won a prize. And I actually think to date, that is the only literary award I've ever won. So very auspicious beginnings. And then, I don't know, like I loved writing. I didn't think you could ever make a living off it. And I was very much discouraged from kind of pursuing that by my parents. You know, they wanted something stable. They wanted like a real job. And so after I graduated college, I, in complete defiance of that, ended up getting a scholarship to dance at Alvin Ailey, and I moved to New York, and I was studying there for the first year or two in New York. And really, like 80% of those jobs that you listed were jobs that I had in New York to just try and survive and pay my rent. I mean, I was like dancing in the daytime, bartending at night. I got a dog. So I was like, well, I already have a dog and I have to take them to the park. So I might as well take other people's dogs with me at the same time. Right. I mean, it was like a 2 for 1. And so I think while I was there, I was doing like a little bit of writing. I was kind of playing around with it. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I had a bunch of friends who were working in all these tech startups, right? That was a big thing in the mid to late 90s. And they had like loads of money. And they're like, well, look, you used to write, right? So why don't we pay you to write some of these articles for us for our websites? And so I started doing that. And that shifted me into magazine writing, which I did for a few years. And along the way, I was kind of doing something kind of autobiographical that turned out to be my first book, which is very deservedly sitting in a drawer because it was not very good. But that was kind of my graduate writing class, is that. Um, and yeah, I don't know. From there, I sort of took a hard left turn into writing mysteries and thrillers, and I fell in love with it. And I just kept going. But for me, writing, I think the thing about writing for me is it's always been sort of an added thing. It's never really the main thing, right? Like it was a great job that I could have while my kids were growing up and I could be home for them. I had like whole swaths of time where like the only person I was interacting with was my family and the UPS driver. And so I needed, I feel like this new stage of my life where I'm doing the therapy and I'm working with people every day. It's interesting. It's the exact opposite of that in some regards.
So, Michelle, I can hardly wait to start your book. I have purchased it and I just have to get through the book I'm reading. I'm trying not to say that because I actually love it. But I am somebody who loves mysteries. I often guess the ending, but I have no clue how someone would write a mystery. I am in awe of mystery writers. And I'd love to know either your process or how you start, or is it as hard as I think it would be?
It is hard. And it's hard because I think you need to deliver. It has to feel satisfying on a very base level, right? Like and you have to explain things. Threads have to come together. And if you forget any, you will get angry emails. This is what I've learned. It's if you ever forget to tie up a loose thread, people are going to be very upset with you.
Do you remember that first book and putting that first manuscript together when I guess you must have been in New York at the time?
No, I was in San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco.
Right around 2000. And that was the first book was my autobiographical one. So that one was like, I'd lived it. So it was not a great book for a lot of reasons, but I think largely because of that. The second book, it's funny when I never really set out to write a thriller. I was actually trying to write this sort of college coming of age story based on my first year at Wesleyan, which was kind of a crazy year. There was like gunshots on campus and bomb threats. And we had the ATF camped out for a couple of months. And it spiraled out into this huge, crazy story that really impacted how I experienced my first year of college. And so I was trying to write sort of a fictionalized version of that. And I kept getting like 20 or 30 pages in and just losing the thread. And finally, on my 10th or 15th try, I got really frustrated and I killed off one of my main characters. And I really didn't mean to. Like it just happened. And I sat back and was like, whoa. And I read through what I'd written. I was like, it's pretty good though. Like this is definitely the best stab at this that I've had, no pun intended. And so I'm like, well, let me just go with it. But I didn't really know, and then I realized I was like, well, there was a part of me that felt like, well, I don't want to write thrillers, do I? And then I realized the way that we get kids excited about books, like most early fiction is mysteries, right? It's all these series. That's what I read growing up. I read like Encyclopedia Brown, The Great Brain, the Bobbsey Twins, all those Nancy Drew books. Like I devoured those. And then when I got a little bit older, I was reading the Agatha Christie's and I burned through all of those. And so it's funny that the way that we engage kids as readers is then something we denigrate as not serious when we get older.
I'd never thought about that.
I hadn't either.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But you're not afraid to let your stories be funny too, which I think is, you do have like a cutting, but sometimes just a sense of the absurd. Your enthusiasm, knowing your personality, I can see how that really comes through. And I think it makes for an interesting tone.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that was actually hard for me. I feel like my first few books, I really struggled with that. Like I had a really hard time figuring out how to put humor in because it never felt like it quite fit. And so Killing Me, the one I wrote right before and kind of during the pandemic, that one for me was really freeing because I needed to have fun so badly. Like I really just felt like this is my escape hatch from all of this awfulness that's happening right now, all of this death and all of this tragedy. And so I wrote this like super campy, kind of silly, but also dark book. And I really feel like that was the first book where I really it felt right. I was like, oh yeah, this is finally, I figured out how to do this. Because it's not easy. It's not easy to put humor in books. Like humor on the page is different from when you're talking to somebody, when you're, even watching it on screen. It's definitely different.
Oh, Killing Me is really sticks its landing, though. I think it's got all of the things. And I don't know that I knew that you'd written it in COVID, but knowing that is sort of an extra layer of fascinating to me because it really does feel like it sprang out of just, something very other than the reality we were all living.
Yeah. And there was a point, like, I feel like I'd written maybe the first quarter of it and then COVID hit. And, when I finally felt ready to go back to it, we were still deep in it. And I remember having conversations with other writers online where we're like, well, what do we do? Like we were already writing something. Do we put it in? We don't know when this is going to end. So do we include this? Do we pretend it's not happening? Do we create this weird other sort of timeline? And I ended up kind of going that route where it's not something that any of the characters ever mention. It's not brought up. And it's so interesting because now that not that we're out of it, but that we've kind of emerged into relative normalcy again. I think what's so interesting about that is I feel like there is this rejection, this sort of innate repulsion of that experience. Like I was just watching a show the other day where they set it in COVID. And I remember having a moment when they all walked on in the masks and I was like, oh, like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to watch this. And, my grandmother actually lost two siblings in the influenza epidemic in 1918, 1919. And it was always so interesting to me that like she never spoke of it. I had no idea until like my dad kind of offhanded mentioned it while we were going through COVID. And I think there is this, like, as a species, when we emerge from something like that, we want to just sort of lock the door, right? We want to put it behind us and not have it as like a present part of our lives in the same way. So there's a part of me is like, okay, like I'm kind of glad that I did that, but it was an interesting choice to have to make.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, just thinking of that as a genre, all the writers who wrote during COVID and how they were impacted by that. I bet a lot of books were written during that time.
I wrote a book in COVID and it was really melancholic. And then we put it away. My editor put it away, for, I don't know, 7-8 months. When I went back into it, I thought, what is this?
Well, and I think that's the other thing is that I think that sometimes when it's too dark, like especially in mysteries and in crime fiction, like when it is relentlessly dark, I find it exhausting, right? Like it gets hard for me to go back. I will go back to it, but it's hard for me to go back to it. I've really struggled with that sometimes because it just feels like, oh my God, like I can't breathe. Like I'm suffocating under the weight of all of this darkness. And so I think it's so important to incorporate that. Like, I actually think that Breaking Bad did a really, really good job with that, right? Where they would throw in these kind of absurdity that like lifted everything so that you weren't just in this really dark, tricky, like morality play.
Well, I think we're going to shift gears a little bit because I, as an educator, am really impressed in awe and so grateful for the work you're doing, your advocacy work for LGBTQ plus teens. And I know you've been a court advocate, and I'd love to hear about that work and how it came about, because it's certainly impressive to me, and having watched students go through so many issues around their own identity, I am so grateful for all the people who are there working for them.
No, it's funny. It actually weirdly came out of the writing. I wrote a series back in like 2011, I think 2012, a young adult series called Don't Turn Around, that was about foster kids, right? Basically, the main character is a foster kid who's had a really tough time. And because she's a hacker, she sort of found a backdoor out of the system where she created this fake family that only exists online, and basically like, has this sort of assumed identity where she works as her like foster dad, and has managed to create this sort of smoke and mirrors existence that then gets ripped away from her because she gets targeted, since foster children are very vulnerable in our society. They're not protected in the way that they should be. And I always like doing research. So I did a lot of research on foster care when I was writing the book. I was kind of horrified by a lot of what I read. And I resolved that, as my kids were getting older and I had more time on my hands, that I would do this advocacy work, which my dad actually introduced me to. My dad was doing it in Rhode Island. As he was going into retirement, he started to volunteer as a CASA. So I was a CASA for a couple of years, and my last case was a young person who was trans and who was having a really bad experience in the system and with their therapist specifically. They were getting misgendered a lot by their therapist, so they didn't feel comfortable talking to them, and they had a lot of suicidal ideation. And when they were feeling suicidal, they would call me. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was like, I do not have the toolbox for this. And so during COVID, it just occurred to me, I was like, maybe I go back to school and I get some of these tools so that I can actually be a little more effective at this. And so I took some psychology classes online, and I really loved it. I mean, I was surprised. I'd only taken one like intro to psych class in college way back when. And this was like a whole different experience, and so much has changed in psychology in the last couple of decades as we learn more about neuroscience and, how brains and bodies work. I mean, it's been really a fascinating time to be in this field. So I kind of kept going, and then I ended up on this path that, like, there are times where I'll sort of stop and be like, what am I doing? Like, how did I end up here? But I really love it. I mean, I spend, 5 days a week now working with these youth who are in foster care, or they're also living in our emergency overnight beds here at the center. They're unhoused, and they're really struggling to kind of make a way for themselves in the world without having been given the support that a lot of us take for granted that we just get from our families. And I will say it's so interesting, the percentage of kids that we get who are, they're out of foster care now, but they grew up in foster care, is striking. It's probably like at least half, probably closer to 3/4.
Wow.
And we have in a lot of ways failed these kids as a society. We kind of, despite the efforts they've made to reform things, it's still not a perfect system. And then they're thrown into this much larger system of homelessness and trying to advocate for themselves, and while having all of this trauma that they've never really processed. So I really love the work. I do. I just, it's not easy, but I really do enjoy it.
And you finished your master's degree.
I have finished my master's
So
degree.
congratulations to that. I said you were working on it because that was on your site, but I know you've finished it. And I guess my question is, how has this work influenced your writing or your character development?
It's a really good question. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I have not had a ton of time to write of late. So I put the writing which I do periodically. I put the writing on a back burner for a while I really just focus on this. I feel like what it's provided me is it's given me a window into a world that I was not that familiar with. Right. I mean, the stories that I hear every day and these windows into different lives. It's like heartbreak breaking a lot of the time, and really moving and emotional. And honestly, I feel like it'll even less as a writer, but almost it's helped me grow as a person, I think, because it's made me really look back and reflect on what I do have and what I was fortunate enough to be given, by my family and by the society, just by virtue of who I was born as, and that's not something that a lot of people have. Um, I'm curious to see, like, I'm kind of toying with a couple different projects right now. I would actually love to do a nonfiction book about this world. That's something that I've been kicking around a little bit. And then my husband and I have kind of been working on and off on this really totally different sort of light horror novel that's almost a modernized version of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is my all-time favorite Agatha Christie novel. So we'll see. I am actually curious to see how it shows up in the work.
There is something really profoundly interesting about working in this very raw and vulnerable space. It's an unusual balance because writing is really the opposite in so many ways. It's just so enclosed and self-protective, and it's really, a little bit of a turtle shell, to go back in and process things and shut the world out. So in some ways it must be a strange space to think about, this work, the advocacy work, the therapy, these lives, these really, dire situations, and then make believe, So it's that, but I can also see how that would be, I don't know, some sort of, if not therapeutic, maybe just some sort of restorative thing to go back into creativity. But it is interesting that your next thought is to go into a nonfiction space. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested in what you're going to do next.
No, I think, it's funny too, though, because I also feel like in a way, I look back sometimes on, like, particularly like bartending, personal training, writing, and this job, which are really in some ways all just slightly different takes on the same job, right? Because it's all about sharing stories at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was the crux of all of those jobs, was the connections you make with people. And I think the difference is, as a writer, you have to imagine the reader, right? Like, I'm always writing to somebody. It's just they're not sitting across from me on a couch and talking to me directly, but we're still having that connection. So I feel like that's the difference for me too, is like when we talk about the books that really affect us, it's the books for me that feel like a conversation. Like, I really like where I end the book and I'm like, wow, I would love to sit down with this writer and talk to them about this book. I have so many questions. Like, I want to know why they did this. I want to know why they thought this. I want to know if they considered doing this. I think that's the thing, is in some ways it is similar, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. Oh, so many times I'll end a book and think, hang on. More questions.
Yeah.
I hope you write the nonfiction book too. I have to say, when I think of my experience as an educator, how much privilege and protection a lot of our kids have because they have a school who cares and understands. For the most part, they have parents who are working toward acceptance and understanding. And the conversations I've had with those parents have been so heartwarming and touching, and the journey that they're on. And it took me a while and really doing some reading and getting to know some of the young people who are unhoused, who are dealing with gender dysphoria, who have so many issues, and where is their advocacy and where is their protection. It's so heartwarming to know that there are people who are focused on them in a way that so many people aren't.
No, thanks. And I think, that's the other thing that's really struck me working with this population is I actually usually kind of default to this person probably doesn't have a high school diploma. I have a couple of folks who are clients who can't read or who read on a very low level. And I think that seeing how, and a lot of it is, I think a lot of it is actually COVID. Like a lot of these folks were in high school during COVID or just entering, middle school and just never went back. So dealing with that population that now, like, how do you get a job if you if you can't check that box on a job application, they're not going to hire you. And so trying to encourage folks to go back for their GED when they're like 23, 24. We have a school here on site actually, and we do educational support, which is one of the most, I'm always encouraging folks. I think it's one of the most important things you can do here. If you do anything else, please do that. We have job training programs here. I think we do everything we can to try and help them get to the next point in their life. It's just hard because, also in the current environment, we're looking at huge, we're a target. So we're having our budget slashed. The amount of resources we're going to be able to offer are going to be more and more limited. And that's really challenging.
So thinking about next steps.
Yes.
You have your new book, Slaying You. I believe it comes out May 13th.
It does. It's my 13th book, and it comes out on the 13th.
How exciting.
Oh, that's cool.
How exciting.
Right?
Is this a companion book to Killing Me?
It is. It is the same characters 6 months later. So basically, it's going to be the whole gang getting back together in Las Vegas for a wedding. And sadly, things go terribly awry.
What could go wrong in Las Vegas, I ask you?
I mean...
Well, we always close with book recs, but this was Mom and I decided to close with your book rec.
Yeah.
With Killing Me and Slaying You.
That's right.
We thought that anybody listening to this podcast should go out and at least own one, but probably get the set.
Preferably both. They really are they make lovely bookends.
That's what I need. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. It's been lovely for me getting to know you a little better and not just in passing at a Super Bowl party where very few people actually watch a game.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. This was lovely.
And I will be ordering my copy, my companion piece.
And thank you so much for tuning into So Mom. And if you like what you see and hear, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you both so much. It was so great seeing you.
So great to see you.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.